stalk, and madmen prowl. Monsters lurk, and victims shiver. Thrills and chills they will deliver. Arise from your graves and get in the mood. It's time to join the Spooky Dudes.
There we go. It's always an awkward opening with me. I know no other way. So we're back. It's 2 nights in a row of doing this show. So it's episode 12. We're back tonight, and I'm super excited to welcome our guest here. He doesn't need any introduction from me, but Mr. Donald Farmer, thanks for joining us. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure. I was like, sometimes I can't tell if my mic's working or not. But how's it going, man?
Oh, great. Yeah, just a beautiful day here in Tennessee.
Yeah. So I didn't mention this before the show. I live just south of Tennessee. I live in Ringgold, Georgia, and we're famous for Dolly Parton getting married and tornadoes as of late. So unfortunately, I also live pretty close to Jeff Burr, so that's kind of cool.
Oh, and he's in Dalton, Georgia.
Yeah, my wife teaches high school in the same county, so it's a small world, man. There's all kinds of things going on around.
Oh
here.
yeah. I've met Jeff a few times. Yeah, one time I came down to Dalton and we went out to eat, and Jeff gave me a copy of one of his movie with David Warner. I was really interested in seeing it.
So I forgot to mention this. So I popped in a Blu-ray the other day. It was the Donald Farmer Collection Volume 1 from Sub Rosa Cinema, and there was a girl in the street, and you walked out to do an interview with her right in front of the Wink Theater, which that's Dalton. I was like, I know this this place.
Oh yeah, where we filmed one of the introductions.
Yeah.
I was with Jackie Hall because she is from Dalton, and when we shot that, and I did 2 movies with Jackie, Dorm of the Dead and Chainsaw Cheerleaders, and so she's the one that showed me where the Wink Theater was, because we filmed Chainsaw Cheerleaders entirely in Dalton because we had an investor that put up all the money for it from Dalton, and his only condition on giving us the budget was that we had to shoot the entire movie in Dalton. So while we were looking at locations in Dalton, Jackie showed me where the Wink Theater was. It's too bad they don't show movies anymore. I guess it's just a full-time church now.
Yeah, they do, and they do some kind of stage plays and stuff, like family. They did like The Grinch or something like that around Christmas, I think. I didn't even know about that theater, and I was just Googling and saw it, and I'm like 20 minutes from there, and so I got all excited. I was like, oh man, we've got this little theater, and I bet I can rent it out and show movies and da-da-da. Nope, it's not a movie theater. Chill out. So a little bit of a bummer.
You're closer to what, Ringgold?
Yeah, I'm in Ringgold. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, Jackie one time took me to Ringgold, and she said a friend of hers had a private movie theater in Ringgold that you could only go through private invitation, that it was not open to the public. And so she took me way back in the backwoods of Ringgold to this guy's house, and he lived in basically a converted trailer, but behind his house in his backyard, he had this big 2-story utility building. And when you went inside the utility building, it was just like a completely pimped out movie theater, with a lobby, theater that sat about 30 or so people. Then it had a curving staircase, and when you went to the second level, there was a pool room with a pool table and a bar, and the walls were just plastered with horror movie posters from the 60s and 70s and 80s. So I just couldn't believe this gorgeous place was in Ringgold. And she said, the only way you can go there is if the guy personally invites you. And Jackie was invited, so she just brought me along as her +1, because I didn't even know the guy, but he was friends with Jackie. So I wonder if that theater is still there. But I mean, if the guy, he just built it for his own amusement, but he must have spent a fortune on it.
Oh man, I've lived here since 2000,
If you're
since
driving in the
2010.
back areas of Ringgold and you see a trailer-looking house with a big 2-story building in the backyard, that's probably it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, I didn't know I was going to get.
You could go knocking on his door and beg to be invited to his theater.
I'll say, hey, listen, I was talking to Donald Farmer the other night, and he said you had a theater. So can I see it? Yeah. That's great, man.
I mean, we were there because I had introduced Jackie to a friend of mine that was making a movie with one of these guys from American Graffiti. One of the actors from that movie was doing a movie with him and Richard Lynch, the used to be a big villain in a lot of movies. And so he posted a thing on a forum saying he needed a blonde actress for his female lead. And so I recommended Jackie to him, and he hired her. And so he put Jackie in his movie, which was fairly big budget by our standards. It was like about over $1 million. And so Jackie got this theater in Ringgold to host the world premiere of the movie for a private audience. And so that's why we were there, was to look at the premiere of this movie that I'd helped Jackie get the female lead in.
That's awesome. I knew you were going to school me on movies tonight. I didn't know you were going to school me on like local folklore where I live, but that's fantastic.
Now you're going to have to be driving down every country road in Ringgold to see if you can get her.
I wish I had known about that when my kids were really little. Okay, go ahead.
I asked this guy how he could afford to build this fancy theater in his backyard, and he said he was a well-paid prison guard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I guess prison guards must make serious money.
So, or maybe he's really thrifty. He just doesn't spend it on anything but the theater.
Well, he sure didn't spend it on his house. His house was smaller than the building behind his house.
Oh man. Well, okay, Donald. So the newest project that you've now, Debbie Does Demons, is it released yet, or it's kind of in coming soon status? I can't remember when that was coming out.
Yeah, it's completely finished, and it will be out by the summer.
Okay. And that one will be on Culture Shock
and Vinegar Syndrome. So it'll be on both websites, cultureshock.releasing.com and Vinegar Syndrome. And yeah, just keep checking. They announce when they're accepting pre-orders for it. So they'll make a posting on their website, and I'll plug the shit out of it on my site as soon as they're ready to accept pre-orders. But it should be soon. It should be within the next 2 months when the pre-orders begin.
Awesome.
I mean, I told Culture Shock that I was going to be a guest at Bride of FrankenCon in June, and I said it would really be great if we had these Blu-rays ready so that I could sell them at Bride of FrankenCon. And so they told me they would do their best to have them ready for me. So I'm hoping they will have them ready for me by then. I mean, Jessa wants them ready too, because she'll be there at my table, and since she's the star of the movie, she wants to be able to sell them also.
Oh yeah, no, that'd be great. We already got a chatter here. Dixie Gers says Donald Farmer. What is the hand thing? Is it raise the roof? Thanks. Clap. I don't know what the hand emoji means.
Well, Dixie's in a bunch of my movies, and she also co-stars in Debbie Does Demons. She's in that one too.
I'm trying to get
something very unusual happens to Dixie in the movie, which I can't spoil, but something very weird happens to her in Debbie Does Demons. Something very, very bizarre.
I can't wait. I'm trying to get Dixie on my show, and she hasn't picked a date yet. So Dixie, pick a date. Let's talk about Debbie Does Demons a little bit. What's the story?
Yeah, well, it's when I made it, I was in Memphis, and I was visiting the neighborhood that my sister lives in. She lives off of Union Avenue in Memphis, and there's this theater in Memphis that has sort of avant-garde or cult type plays. It's a live theater. And so one time I was visiting my sister, and I drove by this theater, and they were presenting Debbie Does Dallas the musical. So I thought it was weird that they had taken a porn movie and turned it into a family-friendly musical, because it was not like a 18 and over musical. Apparently, they were allowing all ages to come see it. So I thought, well, what else could you do with that title? And then I just started thinking of horror movie titles that I could turn that title into, and I instantly thought Debbie Does Demons would be the best way to go. So the next step, once I thought of that title, was to write a script that would fit that title. And I actually wrote two complete different scripts. The first script we filmed the flashback scene for. We filmed this flashback that's supposed to take place 300 years ago when Jessa's character, who's a witch, is captured and about to be executed by a witch finder. And the actor who played the witch finder, Josephus Hudson, after we filmed the scene with him, he tragically passed away with no warning. And so he was originally the lead villain in the original script. So I had to completely rewrite the script. And I promoted Jessa and made her the lead villain. But we still used the flashback that we shot with her and Josephus. So he's still in the movie. It's his final film. Josephus was in quite a lot of my movies. He was in Hooker with a Hacksaw, and he was in Bigfoot Exorcist, and he's in a short movie I did called Hurt Doll. So this actually was our fourth movie together. So he's still in Debbie Does Demons, but we had the script that we filmed was script number 2, the script where I rewrote it and made Jessa the lead character. And one of the inspirations for Debbie Does Demons was the movie Fright Night, where a bunch of kids find out they live next door to a vampire, and they go recruit a horror movie TV host played by Roddy McDowall to help them fight the vampire.
Yeah.
So in my movie, a bunch of kids conjure up a witch, Jessa's character, with a Ouija board. And in order to get rid of her, they consult the help of a late night TV paranormal host who runs a ghost hunter show named Debbie. And so she has a TV show called Debbie Does Demons, where she does paranormal stories. And so they grab this girl thinking that because she runs a paranormal show that she'll know how to fight a witch, which she really doesn't. So it's about how these teens have to team up with the late night TV host to try to fight this witch.
That's awesome.
And then the witch has got to be stopped because she's planning to destroy the world and turn everybody into her demon slaves. So they definitely need to stop her before she does that, before she does to the world what she does to Dixie.
Oh, there's another tease. I love that.
She does something to Dixie, which is a sample of what she wants to do to the entire world, and you don't want her to do that.
I love that you said Fright Night, though. Like that kind of premise of, kids kind of mucking around and finding out, is sort of it's sort of awesome in horror. I love that. So I'm excited about that, man.
Yeah, so we've got a really good cast. We also have Angel Bradford plays Debbie, and Angel's also just working right and left doing. She's pretty much like Jessa. She seems to be doing a new movie every month too. I first found out about her when she was making a movie in North Carolina called House That Eats Flesh, and since then she's done several more. And if you follow her Facebook, Angel is just constantly working, constantly doing new movies. And then joining them is Morgan Thompson, another new horror actress who's just constantly working. And in fact, Morgan and Jessa were just in Salt Lake City this last week doing a new movie together. And so, all three of those actresses, Morgan, Angel, and Jessa, are just three of the busiest actresses I know. I don't think there's barely a month when they're not doing a new movie.
I mean, that's it. I was talking to John Devlin last night on the show, and what is all this? We were talking about the grind that people that do independent art, indie film folks, content producers, people like that, the amount of work you have to put in to like make a living in something independent like that is just an immense amount of work. It's like, everybody says hustle and grind. That's what it is. You have to just constantly be, doing something to make it work, it seems. So that's awesome to see them working so much, honestly.
Yeah, well, I know Jessa and Angel and Morgan all have regular jobs, but they do movies too. They find time to do both. I have a regular job, but it's more of a telephone kind of job that I can do from my home most days. So it's not very time consuming. So I have plenty of time to work on movies.
That's perfect.
A movie every month like they can, because when I do one, it's like a really drawn out process. Where I know there's some people I see where they direct a new movie every 2 months, but you know, for me, since I have to write my own scripts, it takes usually a month or two to write the script, and then once you do that, you got to do a Indiegogo campaign to raise seed money for it, and you got to hire an artist to do a nowadays it's almost a requirement that you have to hire some artist to do your teaser poster to draw interest in your movie. It used to be you could just use photos of your actors and use that as your poster, but nowadays everybody seems to the trend seems to be every movie needs to have a painting for the poster. So paintings are in demand, but that means you have to find artists that can do the painting at a reasonable price. For the
Yeah.
David Demons, I've been using a lot of British artists. I used Rick Melton, who's the cover artist of Dark Side magazine, and he did the official Demons poster. But when people buy the Blu-ray, there's going to be two posters, because Rick Melton did the cover that they'll see on the actual Blu-ray case, but then there's a completely separate artwork on the slipcover done by a different artist. So you actually get two posters when you get it. You get the slipcover poster and then the carton poster, which is what we did with the first Blu-ray. We had two different posters for that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love these releases that have slipcovers. I'm a big slipcover fan. I know some people don't collect them, but I do.
Yeah, well, you made me think when you were talking about that, because I know we're both members of some of the Facebook, video collector groups, Blu-ray and Vinegar Syndrome, stuff like that. And like slipcovers have become this big thing. It used to be this disposable thing that came around your Blu-ray from Walmart. Now it's some of these slipcovers are making the movies worth $100, $200 on the,
Yeah, it
secondary
definitely
market.
enhances value when if you try to sell them on eBay or something, and if you say you're selling it with the slipcover, that definitely increases the price.
Yeah.
A lot of collectors only want to collect movies that have slipcovers, so they're definitely in demand. So a lot of labels don't use them for all of their releases, but they use them at least for their primary releases. But Culture Shock seems to use them for every release they do. They're one of the few labels that goes 100% slipcover on every new release.
Yeah, because like Vinegar Syndrome will do like a limited release, and then the standard release after that most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And Kino Lorber will only do a slipcover for very select releases. The majority of their releases don't have one. They just do them for certain movies. And Severin does them for at least half of their releases. So about half of them have them. And Vinegar Syndrome does them for, it seems like most of their new ones they do them for. They've been doing more and more lately. But I like them. Anytime anybody has a slipcover, it's sort of like an extra inducement to order it. It makes me more tempted to order it.
It is a piece of art that goes in. It's like having a poster that just wraps around the case. It is cool.
Yeah. Do you ever collect from Imprint in Australia? That's one of my favorite labels, because everything they put out has a slipcover, and even though they're from Australia, all of their Blu-rays are region free, so you can play them on any Blu-ray machine in America with no trouble.
I have not. I've heard of them because I used to listen to, oh man, Just the Discs. You ever listen to that podcast before?
No, but I just started collecting Imprint because they put out a lot of Blu-rays of titles that I wanted. Like they put out the Brotherhood of Satan and Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and a lot of great genre titles. So that sort of got me interested in them. One really good title they put out is The Assassination Bureau with Diana Rigg from the Avengers and Oliver Reed. That's one of my favorite Imprint titles. And then another good label from England is, do you ever collect Indicator Blu-rays?
Heard of them too. I don't have anything from them though. No.
Indicator's also they put out a lot of Hammer box sets. Now with Indicator, they're sort of half and half. Half of their releases are region free where you can play them in America, and half of them are region B where you can only play them if you have a region free Blu-ray machine, which I bought one. I bought a region free Blu-ray machine and it worked for a while. And then one day it all of a sudden stopped working and it now only plays American Blu-rays. So I don't know what, I must have pushed a button somewhere that deactivated the region-free feature. I don't know what I pushed, but I apparently pushed the wrong button, and I turned off the region-free ability. So I don't know how to fix it. So I guess if I ever want a region-free Blu-ray, I'm gonna have to buy another one, which is like a pain in the neck. But I can't figure out what I did that deactivated the region-free capability. But I did something apparently that I wasn't supposed to do.
Yeah, my buddy Mark that runs Orbit DVD, he's been trying to talk me into buying a region free player. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I need to.
Well, if you buy them from Imprint in Australia, you don't have to worry. Everything they put out is region free, and lately Indicator has been focusing more on region free because they know from feedback from their American fans that we don't want the region B stuff. We want everything to be region free. So. But they've been putting out a lot of genre titles lately. They've just put out 2 genre-lin movies, and he's very big with people that like the Euro horror scene.
Mm-hmm.
And they put out Corruption from with the rare Peter Cushing sleaze horror movie, which is probably the trashiest movie Peter Cushing ever made. And they put out several Hammer box sets. Unfortunately, all their Hammer box sets are region B, so that's sort of unfortunate, but the new genre-lin movies are going to be region free.
I'll have to check them out. I kind of put the brakes on my Blu-ray buying for a little bit leading up to FrankenCon. Typically my bank account just gets sort of emptied into the con. So it's, I got to pump the brakes on it a little bit. I saw on, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Donald, that cut out.
I was just saying there's one thing that has slightly curtailed my Blu-ray buying is that before I buy a Blu-ray, sometimes I look on the internet and see if there's a movie that I'm not that big on getting all the special features where I only want to see the movie. First, I check online to make sure it's not already been uploaded to some website where I could watch it for free. And I found this one website that has so many movies I want to watch. Sometimes just this one website alone. I don't want to mention the name because I don't want to give them free publicity on the phone. I don't want to turn this into a commercial for them, but know who I'm talking about. It's a website that basically there's a movie from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or just anything that's at least 10 years old or older. 9 out of 10 times they'll have it. If you name any movie they don't have the more recent movies that are in the last 10 years so much, but any movie 10 years old or older, no matter how big it is, 9 times out of 10, you'll find it on this website. And they usually have several different uploads where you can check the various uploads and find the one that looks the nicest.
Wow. Okay. I don't even know what this site is.
People in the know which website I'm talking about, but I'm not going to give them free advertising. But most of my friends know what I'm talking about. But it's since I discovered this website, it's been eating up a lot of my time. Just I'll type in movies that I've never seen before that I want to see, just to see if this website has them. And the vast majority of the time it has them. So I'm amazed at all the stuff I found on there.
That's awesome. Well, the other day on Facebook, I saw some pictures that you uploaded that had been taken a while back where you met Jess Franco and Lena Romay years and years and years ago.
Yeah, I met them twice. The first time I met them was in '89. I was at the Cannes Film Festival where Jess was having 2 world premieres. He was having the world premiere of his movie Faceless with Carolyn Monroe and Bridget Leahy. And then he was having the world premiere of a less famous movie of his called Esmeralda Bay that stars Charlie Sheen's brother, Ramon Estevez, the lesser known of the Sheen boys or the Estevez boys, not as famous as Emilio Estevez or Charlie Sheen, but he was the star of this movie, and then it also had George Kennedy. So I went to the premiere of these two Franco movies, and I was thinking Franco would be there since they were having his world premiere, and I hoped I could interview him for Fangoria, since at the time I was writing for Fangoria, and so I talked to his publicist, and they told me that unfortunately Franco was not attending, but he would be happy to do an interview with me if I would go to where he was. And they said to meet him, I would have to go to Paris, but I was going to go to Paris anyway to catch my flight home. So, when I went back to Paris to catch my airline flight back to America, I just rendezvoused with him at a location in Paris he told me to come to, and did my Fangoria interview. And then I met him again a few years later when I interviewed him on video for a feature that is now available from Severin Video. My interview with Franco that I did on video with him and Lena is now a special feature on two different Franco released by Severin Films. I think one of them is one of the parts is on a movie of his they put out called Nights of Endless Sex, and then I forgot what the other one was, but it's two of his sexy movies that have my interviews with him broken into two parts.
Oh, Night of Open Sex.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because
man.
what happened was this was in '93, and at the time I was I had just met this producer in New York City named Juan Almodovar, and he told me that he was producing the new Jess Franco movie. And so it turned out to be this Franco movie that was shot but never released. It was shot under the title The Gold Bug, and then it was, I think, alternately known as Jungle of Terror. But he financed it, or did most of the financing, and Franco shot it, but for some reason the movie never went beyond the rough cut. And but I got to know Juan that way, and Juan set up this meeting with me and Franco in Spain, and told me that if I went to Spain and met Franco, that I could do my video interview with him. So that's what I did. And then Juan, the very next year, ended up co-producing a movie that I directed with Brigitte Nielsen and Dana Plato called Compelling Evidence. So I did both of these projects with Juan. And then after that, after Juan produced my movie, then he made a movie of his own that he directed, starring this guy from the Breaking Bad TV show that plays the big villain, Giancarlo Esposito.
Yeah.
If you ever watched Breaking Bad, he's the Hispanic sort of villain. So anyway, so Juan produced this movie with Giancarlo, which was entered into the Sundance Film Festival and was accepted for Sundance. So Juan really made a big leap in 3 movies. He started out as a Franco producer, then he produced one of mine, and then he ended up being at Sundance with his big time movie with Giancarlo Esposito.
He's part of the Star Wars.
Then after that, he kind of
Too.
disappeared. I have no idea where he is now. He produced this big movie, and then he just sort of disappeared off the face of the earth. So it's a big mystery whatever happened to him. But anyway, I have him to thank for hooking me up with Franco the second time, so that I could do my video interviews with him.
That's
and if anybody wants to him, like I said, part 1 and part 2 are spread out over 2 different Severin Franco Blu-rays.
I believe I have both of them, and they're in my pile to watch.
Yeah.
As a compulsive
It has a lot of really
buyer.
good Franco. Yeah, they have a lot of good Franco extra features that they put on their Blu-rays. I did another extra feature for them while I was in Paris on one of my trips. I interviewed Franco's regular music guy, Daniel White, who does the music for most of the Franco movies. And so I did probably the only known video interview with Daniel White shortly before he passed. And so that interview is on yet another one of these Franco Blu-rays that Severin puts out. And then another guy did a whole series of special features for them, where he goes to all the filming locations Franco used all over Europe. And so I think they've got that as like a 4 or 5 part series. So.
Oh, that's Stephen Thrower, right? The guy that wrote the books.
And so he visits all these filming locations that Franco used, especially his locations in Spain and Portugal.
Oh yeah.
The Franco filmed all over Europe. There's hardly a country he didn't film in. He filmed in France, Germany, Turkey, all over the place.
Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, he had, I think his most productive year was like 14 movies came out in the same time or something like that. Like, just very
He had a
prolific.
few. Yeah, he had some times in the '70s where he was just doing an insane number of movies. Or
And then,
sometimes a movie of his would come out in different titles with different versions, like a normal version or a hardcore version. So a lot of his films, had multiple releases with different titles where they're hard to keep track of. Like
yeah.
his movie with Lena Romay called The Bare Breast Countess, I think is the best known title, but it's also known as The Swallowers, and it's also known as Loves of Arena. So some of his movies had multiple titles like that.
Well,
Yeah, he was one of a kind. I don't think there'll ever be anybody quite like Franco again.
oh, I agree. I got a buddy named Jason Rudy who is making films in the spirit of Franco, but yeah, I agree with you. Um, very unique. I'm not sure you could do all that these days. Even though the technology's
Yeah,
there for sure. It's more accessible than ever, I guess.
yeah. Well, it's amazing. For most of Franco's career, he was filming all of his movies on expensive 35 millimeter film. It was only, toward the end of his life, the last 10 years or so of his life, that he started shooting everything on video. But the vast majority of his movies are shot on 35 millimeter and were shown in theaters in Europe, even if they weren't shown in theaters here.
Well, speaking of origins, I want to ask a few questions here. What what was your genesis into horror? Like, what got you into the genre? Because it seems like you've been comfortable in it for a long time, but what got you into it?
Well, the second movie my mother ever took me to is what initially got me to be a genre movie fan, because she would never take me to horror movies, but she took me to see The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the Ray Harryhausen movie, and that got me interested in fantasy films and movies with giant creatures in them. So I started out as a fan of just movies that had any kind of giant monster. Like my first memory of ever watching TV was when I was like 4 years old, and I saw a commercial for the Burt Gordon movie Earth versus the Spider on TV, and that's watching that commercial on TV is my very first TV memory. And then the second movie I saw, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, is one of my earliest movie theater memories. And so for a few years there, I was just mainly a fantasy movie fan. It was not till around I was 6 or 7 that I saw my first horror movie. Since my parents would never take me to them at the theater, the only way I could see a horror movie was if they're shown on late night TV. And so the first horror movie I ever saw on TV was Return of Dracula with Francis Lederer, which was shown on TV under the title Curse of Dracula. That one and Hammer's Revenge of Frankenstein are the first two horror movies I ever saw on TV. And so that's what got me hooked. Watching those two got me hooked into horror movies. I instantly, wanted to see all the horror movies I could. And right away, there was a show every Saturday night in Nashville called Chalk Theater that showed all the Universal horror movies from the 30s and 40s. So by watching that every Saturday, that's where I saw all the big classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, House of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Meets the Wolf Man, The Mummy's Curse, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Hand. I saw all of those on Chalk Theater. And but these movies were, I was interested in them, but they really didn't scare me. It wasn't until I saw the Vincent Price movie, The Tingler, on TV that I saw a movie that actually scared me so much that I was so scared that I actually turned off the TV and wasn't brave enough to watch it all the way through. So I'd been watching horror movies for a few years till I finally came across one that actually scared me. And The Tingler completely freaked me out because in the movie it says that you have this monster that grows along your spinal column that will strangle you to death if you're frightened of something. And I was so little, I just believed the movie was true, and I believed that, oh, is this true? I really have this in my spinal column, and if I act a little scared, it's going to choke me to death. So I totally believed everything in this movie. I was too stupid to know otherwise. And then
Go ahead,
my
sorry.
mother took me one time to see a family movie. Like I said, she wouldn't take me to a horror movie, but before this movie started, they have a preview for a horror movie that kind of freaked me out. They showed a preview for this movie called House of the Damned that had a legless man who walked on his hands with a knife in his mouth and was creeping into a woman's bedroom. They showed just that much in the preview, giving you the impression that this legless man was going to climb into bed with the woman and stab her to death in her sleep. So when I saw that preview, it sort of, completely freaked me out and also got me interested in more extreme horror movies that were more on the extreme scary side than what I was used to seeing on TV. So it was sort of a culmination of all those things that turned me into a horror fan.
That's awesome. What is your favorite subgenre of horror?
Well, my favorite horror movies are usually from the 60s, like the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe movies, and then the Hammer Dracula movies with Christopher Lee. Those are my two favorite horror series. But I'm a huge fan of all the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe movies. One reason I guess I liked them so much was because I was not allowed to see them when they played my local theater. So for all of them, I pretty much had to wait for them to come on TV But one time, there were two times where my parents took me to see Disney or kiddie movies. And one time before the kiddie movie started, they showed a preview for Vincent Price and Tales of Terror. And the preview scared me so much I had to cover my eyes with my hands watching it, which when I watch that preview now, you wonder what, it was so scary. But at that time, it seemed scary to me. And then another time they took me to a kiddie movie, and the preview before the movie was the Vincent Price movie Haunted Palace. So that's the only two I got of the Poe series in a theater before I finally was able to see them on TV many years later. So I guess part of being fascinated by those films was just being denied them for so many years. And when I wasn't allowed to see them, it just built them up in my mind to impossibly high expectations. And then when I finally saw them, they sort of satisfied my expectations, and it turned out they weren't disappointing at all. They actually were as good as I imagined them to be.
Forbidden fruit.
Yeah. So when you won't allow somebody to see something, it just makes them want it all the more. Parents should understand that. If they had just let me see them when I wanted to see them, maybe I wouldn't have been so obsessed.
Yeah. Okay. Least favorite subgenre of horror.
Well, I'm not really in the 80s. The biggest thing going in horror was the slasher movies. And I thought that would be my least favorite because I got my fill of the slasher movies very quickly. I was very depressed in the 80s because the best movies in the 80s were the Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci movies. That back in those days, those movies, unlike now, Dario Argento movies actually played theaters in the late 70s and the 70s and early 80s. Yeah. And Lucio Fulci movies, it's hard to believe that now, but all of his classics played theaters in big and small towns. His movies like Zombie, House by the Cemetery, Gates of Hell, aka City of the Living Dead, and The Beyond, all those movies played theaters all over the place. So it wasn't like you had to seek them out on video. You could see them at your local theater. The Black Cat too, that played theaters. And so New York Ripper, that's one I don't believe that. I never saw that play a theater in my area. It may have been bigger cities, but not in Tennessee. But that was the best part of the 80s for me, was those theaters. But as far as American-made horror movies in the 80s, it was all these slasher movies like Terror Train and Happy Birthday to Me and, Prom Night. And I got my fill of those really quickly. I got sort of sick of those. But now so much time has passed that I kind of look at them fondly. But at the time, I wasn't a very big fan of them. But the one subgenre that's popular now that I'm really sick of, that I really do not like, and I don't even hardly go to them, is all these ghost movies, like The Conjuring and Insidious. I'm totally done with the ghost movies, and if I'd never see another ghost movie, it's fine with me. I think there's been way too many ghost movies.
What about The Changeling?
I finally saw that for the first time just last year. I'd never seen it before.
Me too.
So I finally watched it last year. I bought the Severin it came out from Severin Films, so I bought their version of it. I was very, very disappointed. I didn't care for that at all. Maybe I would have liked it better if I saw it in a theater. But for me, the greatest ghost movie of all time is Legend of Hell House, which I saw at a theater when it came out in '73. And for me, every time I see a ghost movie, it has to measure up to Legend of Hell House. And I've never seen a ghost movie that came anywhere close. So I'd always heard that The Changeling was a classic, but when I finally saw that, I thought it was a huge disappointment. I thought it's nothing compared to Legend of Hell House, which is always, I don't guess I'll ever find another ghost movie I like as much as Legend of Hell House.
Probably
The Legend
not.
of Hell House, huge impact when I saw it at the theater. I think I saw it twice at a theater on a big screen. It doesn't have quite the same impact on TV, but at a theater, it really delivered the goods. One thing I like about Legend of Hell House so much is because everything in it is a practical effect. It was made before the age of CGI effects, which is one thing that ruins contemporary ghost movies for me.
Mm-hmm.
Any ghost movie that has bad effects, that just instantly ruins it. Like Guillermo del Toro made a ghost movie a few years ago with that guy that plays Loki in the Avengers. What's his name?
Oh, Benedict
And
Cumberbatch.
no, not him. The guy that plays Loki, Benedict Cumberbatch, plays Doctor Strange.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But
Tom. Oh, shit.
Hiddleston.
Yeah, that's
Hiddleston,
it.
I think.
Yeah. Tom Hiddleston.
He made a ghost movie with Guillermo del Toro, who I normally like because he did that movie, The Shape of Water, which was very good, and he did the Pan's Labyrinth, which was a really good movie. But this ghost movie Guillermo del Toro made, I just hated it because it was just constant CGI effects that looked phony as shit. And all these phony-looking CGI effects just totally destroyed the movie for me.
Crimson Peak, right?
Yeah, so I thought that movie was completely wrecked by phony-looking CGI effects. Whereas, a lot of people say the greatest ghost movie ever made is The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise, which I think that is a classic. It was made in the early '60s, and that would be my number 2 favorite behind Legend of Hell House. But a few years ago, they remade The Haunting with a new version starring Owen Wilson, and the new version is full of CGI effects that ruined it, just like Crimson Peak was ruined by CGI. So pretty much all these new ghost movies are full of CGI, and CGI basically ruins a ghost movie. The only way a ghost movie can work for me is all the effects have to be practical, because CGI is always, it looks just like you're watching a video game. It just, anytime you can obviously tell it's CGI, it just sort of ruins the movie for me. If you're going to use CGI, it needs to be as transparent as possible, where you're not aware you're looking at CGI.
Yeah.
Like the Roman Polanski movie, The Ninth Gate. If you listen to his audio commentary, he points out various places in the movie where he used CGI, but he used it in a very transparent way where you would never ever guess that you're looking at CGI. So he's one of the few directors who knows how to use CGI correctly, where it doesn't stand out and stick out like a sore thumb. But most directors nowadays that use it, they just, I mean, although the technology has gotten better, it doesn't look as fakey as it used to. It's still it's very obvious that you're looking at a computer effect. That's why I hate the Avatar movies, because they look just like you're watching a 2 or 3 hour video game.
Going back in time to the video store era, what is a VHS cover that stands out in your mind? Like the first thing when we say video store, what's the first cover that pops in your brain?
Well, obviously, I'm partial. My favorite covers are my own covers for Cannibal Hookers and Scream Dream. I thought the cover for Scream Dream was one of the greatest video covers of all time. The company that did it was this Philadelphia company, and I just love the shit out of that cover. It's one of my all-time favorite covers. But for movies by other directors, I think Fred Olen Ray's cover for Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers is a really classic cover. Oh, yeah. And I also like the cover for this movie called Vampires Daughters of Darkness, which just showed, it was very eerie looking. It wasn't anything particularly unique, but it was just a very eerie looking cover with the 2 female vampires. And there was some that was one that really stands out is Microwave Massacre, the cover of that one with the guy's head in the microwave. That cover really stands out. That's one, once you see it, you'll always remember it.
Oh yeah, that's
another one.
That's a good Vinegar Syndrome release too.
Yeah, and then also there was one called Gourmet Zombie Chef from Hell. That one had a really great cover too. And then
Hold on, I'm having to look
then
that one. What
Cannibal
was that again? Gourmet Zombie?
Gourmet Zombie Chef from Hell, I believe it was called.
Gotta look
Either
that one
that or
up. I've
just
never even heard of
Gourmet
that.
Zombie Chef. Yeah, but yeah,
Oh
that one had a really great cover.
no, I have seen this. I haven't seen the movie. I've seen this cover before for sure.
Yeah, I believe it was
That's
directed by
fantastic.
a guy who was a protege of Herschel Gordon Lewis. And
Don Swan.
so, yeah, that one, the cover of that one, because that's back in those days, if you had a movie that had a extremely minuscule budget like my movies did, you needed to have a really dynamic cover because you're basically trying to make people, when they go into a video store, rent your movie based on the cover. You don't want your cover to give them any clue as to what your budget was. So your cover should ideally look as good as the covers on the bigger labels of the time. Because, in the 80s, the big labels that put out the more prestige horror movies were labels like, Vestron was like the big player on the block. Vestron had all the prestige movies back then, like they had Chopping Mall from Jim Wynorski, and they had Lair of the White Worm. So, if you had a big prestige horror movie with a budget of at least $1 million or more, you usually went to Vestron. My friend Buddy Cooper from North Carolina, he made this movie called The Mutilator, and
Oh yeah.
he licensed his movie to Vestron, and he told me that Vestron gave him a 6-figure advance, which was really sweet. But he spent quite a lot of money making that, because not only did he shoot it on 35 millimeter, but he cut the negative and made prints. And whenever you do that, it's one thing to shoot your movie on 35, but to actually post it on 35, that's where you run into serious money, because it's just it's ridiculously expensive to post a movie on 35, cut the negative, and make prints. I've only worked on one movie where we did that. This was this movie I did with Camille Keaton and Cameron Mitchell called No Justice, where I wasn't the director. I was the line producer and the casting director. And one of my jobs was just to hire celebrities to be in that movie. But anyway, the guy who put up all the money for that movie, he wanted it done the old fashioned way. So he shot it on 35 millimeter, and he hired an editor that had just worked on a Rutger Hauer movie for Gary Graver I think it was called Wanted Dead or Alive. And so he hired these editors straight off this big Rutger Hauer movie to edit his movie on film. And so they edited it the old-fashioned way on a moviola and cut the negative and made him 2 35 millimeter prints that he could show at local drive-ins. And I think he told me he ended up spending $350,000 doing it that way. So, to do it that way is ridiculously expensive. And then the next movie he did, he once again shot on 35, but he didn't spend all that money on posting. He did the complete post on video because he didn't want to spend that much money again posting a movie on 35 millimeter. Because, that's just ridiculously expensive. Nowadays, everybody has editing software on their laptop, so you don't have to spend all that money anymore. You can just edit the movie on your own laptop.
True. Yeah. The
So
technology's easier to use than ever, but
so it's not, because now before video came out, before people started owning video machines, if you made a movie, the only viable market was the theatrical market, and the only way to crack the theatrical market was to have 35 millimeter prints that you could be shown. Even if you didn't shoot your movie on 35 millimeter, like for example, Fred Olen Ray shot his movie Scalps on 16 millimeter. And then other movies like Deadly Spawn were shot on 16 millimeter, but in order to play in theaters, they had to be blown up to 35 millimeter, which is just pretty expensive by itself. So yeah, to get your movie, I think one of the cheaper movies to actually play in theaters was Blood Feast. I think Herschel Gordon Lewis told me he spent a little under $50,000 on that, including the cost of making 35 millimeter prints. But that was in the early 60s when prices were probably a little lower. But that was the only way you could be a legit national director back in those days, was to spend that kind of money. But nowadays you can make a movie, get national, international distribution, and make a movie for just a few grand because you got all this software on your laptop, and digital cameras are so cheap.
Yeah.
So it's a very affordable age we live in, a very affordable to be a filmmaker.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so throughout the years, what's been your favorite era of physical media?
I was partial to the 80s, the first decade of video, where you could buy videos at video stores. Yeah, the 80s was my personal favorite as a producer and director, because back then video stores were all independent. Every town seemed to have one. You could drive all the way across America. Every little town had one or more video stores. And for the first several years of video in the early 80s and mid 80s, all these stores were independently owned. They were all mom and pop stores. And so, it was much easier to get distribution nationwide. It wasn't all these chains like Blockbuster Video. They came along later. And when Blockbuster came along, it became much more difficult to get your movie into these stores, because they were very picky about what they would accept. Just like Walmart today, if you want to get your movie in Walmart, Walmart is incredibly picky about what they'll accept for display in their stores. I mean, Walmart has two stages. A lot of movies they'll allow on their website. They'll sell they will sell. There's this recent movie I made that I act in called Chicken's Blood. They'll sell that movie on the Walmart website, but I've never seen that movie in a Walmart store. So you can actually be on the Walmart website, but still not be accepted into the Walmart stores. But back in the early, and all through the 80s, it was way easier to get your cheap movie into video stores nationwide before all the chains took over. Because back then, all you had to do was hook up with a distributor that worked with these national video retail magazines, and they would take out ads in these magazines. And these magazines were mailed to every single mom and pop operation that owned a video store. They would all get these industry magazines listing all the new movies for sale. All of my early movies were heavily advertised in these mags. Demon Queen, Cannibal Hooker, Scream Dream were all advertised in these magazines. And these magazines would tell the independent video store owners which movies they needed to have in their stores. So these magazines would actually come out telling these people, you need to have Donald's Cannibal Hooker movie in your stores. And they complied. And back then, I think like 8 out of 10 video stores I visited had my movie. It was really overwhelmingly distributed in most of the video stores I checked. And, when I had a new movie coming out back then, I would just drive all over the place checking video stores to see if they had my movie. So it was way, way easier. But then when Blockbuster came along, Blockbuster just had all these requirements, and they were picky as shit. And I think Blockbuster ultimately carried 2 of my movies because they were so picky. I did several movies, but only 2 of them were accepted by Blockbuster. I actually had better luck getting my movies into the Best Buy chain. Best Buy carried quite a few of my movies back in those days before they started eliminating their video section. You remember the days, you remember how it used to be 20 years ago when you'd go into a Best Buy and they'd have a huge DVD section?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Now you go into it and maybe they've got one aisle. Every time I go to a Best Buy, their DVD Blu-ray section gets smaller and smaller. It's really sad, but used to have a gigantic DVD. Like it seemed like half the store was DVDs and Blu-rays, but no more.
Oh, it was the place to go for physical media back in the day, for sure. And you could get good deals too. They had good prices.
Yeah, Best Buy carried at least 6 of my movies. They carried Erotic Vampire in Paris. They carried my Civil War movie, Blood and Honor. And they carried all 4 of my Danny Finley movies, Compelling Evidence, Vicious Kiss, Demolition Highway, and Deadly Run. They carried all 6 of those movies. So yeah, those were the golden days of Best Buy. I love that store, but now they're just a shadow. Now, when you go into a Best Buy now, you can barely find any Blu-rays at all.
Yeah, it's sad.
Kind of sad. You'll find more Blu-rays if you go to a Barnes and Noble now.
Well, this is a new question I just added to my bank of questions last night because of who my guest was, but latest trend we've been seeing on social media is like AI generated art and AI written text and things like that. What's your opinion on that sort of trend and what could come about from it?
Oh yeah, well, it definitely has its place, and one, it seems to be a fad now. It'll be interesting to see in a year from now if it's still as popular as it is now, because now it's still in its fad period
Yeah.
with all these new coming out like Lenza, which are people are irresistible, interested in toying around with them and seeing what they can do. One thing that these AI things are good for is making teaser posters where
Yeah.
you're just trying to get some initial word going about your movie, but I really wouldn't recommend them for making your final poster. Your final poster, I still should be either a painting or a heavily Photoshop montage. I know my early my movie Cannibal Hookers, when it came out in 1988, because we shot it in 87 and it came out on video in 88. The cover was a photo cover, but it was a photo that had been heavily photo doctored, where you could tell it had gone through whatever was the Photoshop equivalent of 1987 and had been heavily doctored to get that look. And then Scream Dream had a photo cover that was just a pure photo, but it was a very intricately shot photo with really heavy duty studio. You could tell it was shot by a very professional photo studio with really great lighting and everything. So it really looked super professional. It looked as expensive as some of the Vestron covers. That was the one time that I thought my cover looked as good as any Vestron cover.
Oh man, I love those Vestron covers.
So that's one thing I loved about, because if people went into a video store and saw my Scream Dream next to a Vestron, looking at the two, they'd have no idea that one cost maybe $1 million and that mine cost about $5,000.
It's a great cover. I mean, it's a really, really great cover. Okay. Staying on the, that train of, controversy. This is the last controversial question I have. What are your thoughts on sort of the whole cancel culture? And like, if the example I always bring up is like Victor Salva, who made the Jeepers Creepers films, canceling the art because of the artist. What are your thoughts on that? And I don't mean canceling the movie. I mean canceling in the court of public opinion and sort of that.
Well, it's really unfair when you look at it a historical perspective, because most of there's many classic directors going all the way back to the 1920s that were involved in scandals that would be considered grounds for canceling them if it happened today. But no one ever bought. Metropolis is considered and M are considered one of the great classics, even though the director Fritz Lang was heavily suspected of murdering somebody in Munich, but he was never brought to trial for this murder. And so even though a lot of people think it's an open and shut case that he's guilty, but still he never had the stigma of being a suspected murderer follow him for the rest of his life, and he never had any kind of canceling going on. Another big star who would be canceled if this happened now was Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas is pretty much been blatantly accused of raping teenage Natalie Wood when she was a teenager.
Ooh.
But because she didn't ever go press charges against him, because she didn't want to, she thought at the time that would have destroyed her career. He got away with it. But even though there's been many testimonies that make it pretty obvious that he definitely did it, if you research it and research all the proof that Kirk Douglas raped Natalie Wood, it's pretty conclusive and pretty damning evidence against him. But none of his movies have ever been canceled. And so him raping teenage Natalie Wood is just as bad as or worse than what some of these current celebrities are canceled for. So it seems like, the expiration date for the scandals of older celebrities has run out. And no matter how bad what they did was, they're not going to be penalized, and their movies aren't going to be rejected for distribution. Nobody's going to say, well, Spartacus can't be distributed because Kirk Douglas is a rapist. So it's it's a different standards for people of different decades.
I get a unique answer every time. That one was not that was really good. Great answer. Okay, back to the easy stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got more and more to say about cancel culture. I could talk about that all night.
We can do it. We can do a whole special. Favorite mask or costume from a horror movie or a character
Well,
from a horror
my
character.
favorite mask is probably Herbert Lom's mask from the Hammer 1962 Phantom of the Opera.
Oh yeah.
That's one of my favorites. I also like the mask that's displayed. Probably the greatest movie mask of all time is the mask that's nailed onto Barbara Steele's face in the 1960 Mario Bava movie Black Sunday. The very beginning of the movie, she's being executed for being a witch. They nailed this really elaborate mask onto her face, and that mask would be definitely my number one favorite movie mask of all time. It's a really beautiful. In fact, they've made replicas of it that you can buy now. So a lot of people have been buying these replicas of the Barbara Steele mask. But yeah, that would be no contest. That would be my favorite mask of all time.
That's a great pick. Okay, 3 films that every horror fan needs to see. Someone's just starting from scratch, and you got to give them 3 desert island films. What are they?
Well, obviously Legend of Hell House, because it's my choice for the greatest ghost movie of all time. And then Vincent Price is one of my favorite actors, and if I would recommend any one of his movies, I would recommend The Abominable Dr. Phibes, which is my favorite of all his movies, which is just the perfect combination of a great, incredible cast full of horror greats like Joseph Cotton from Lady Frankenstein and Baron Blood, and Carolyn Munro from Dracula AD 1972 and At the Earth's Core, and Vincent Price and Hugh Griffith, who's been in tons of great movies like Cry of the Banshee and Tom Jones. And so just an incredible cast, and it had some of the best art direction. It's one of the most beautiful horror movies ever made. It's just got incredibly gorgeous sets. Vincent Price's headquarters is this elaborate Art Deco style mansion, which is just one of the greatest examples of art direction in a horror movie of all time. And it's got one of the best scripts, which was actually ghost written a little bit and tampered with by Brian Clemens, the writer of the TV show The Avengers. And so he sort of wrote the whole last 15 minutes of the movie, but didn't get any credit for it. And so that would be definitely an essential one. And then I'm a big fan of Hammer films, and there's many, many Hammer films that would deserve to be a desert island film. But I guess my personal favorite of all the Hammer films is the third Christopher Lee Dracula one called Dracula is Risen from the Grave, which is the best looking of all of them. It's got just, again, incredible art direction, incredible cinematography. It's probably the best looking Hammer movie of all of them. Also, it's got the most unique killing a vampire scene of the whole series, where driving a stake through his heart doesn't work, and he just, as soon as they drive a stake through his heart, he just rips it right out and throws it at them. So that sort of vampire mythology, a brand new twist. And then it also has in all these vampire movies, you're supposed to hold a cross up to ward them out, and so this movie has another twist where the hero of a movie is an atheist, so he doesn't believe the cross has any power. So the whole movie becomes whether this atheist will be able to defeat Dracula. So it's probably the most original script. I thought it was the most original take on a vampire movie, and also it's Christopher Lee never looked scarier. It's probably the scariest of his performances, where he's actually, most of his performances, he's just sort of stands around, but in this one, he's actually legitimately scary. So it's definitely my favorite. So that would be my 3 desert island picks.
Great picks. Okay. Last question. What advice would you give to an up and coming filmmaker, someone who wants to get started in making horror movies?
Oh, well, I'll make this quick since my phone is now at 2%. It's probably going to die any minute. But I would say that you should explore making short clips, shooting either with your phone or with a digital camera and editing on your laptop, and just start making short clips, even maybe little clips you can edit for TikTok, or clips you can edit for YouTube, and just experiment with that. And that's what I did. I experimented with making short films all through the 70s. Before I ever attempted to make a feature in the 80s, I had already made several short films that are in that collection, that we had mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So before I made my first feature, I had already been experimenting quite a lot with filmmaking. And so that's what you should do. You don't just dive into a feature. Experiment, make a lot of shorts, get comfortable with it, and also learn the basics of film grammar, and then it's okay if you break all the rules, but you should know what the rules are first before you break them. Just like abstract artists sort of need to know the general rules of form and structure in a traditional art before they start breaking them as an abstract painter. In the same way, I think a filmmaker needs to know the formal rules of composition in film before they go around breaking the rules.
Great advice.
Like the guy who directed the guys who directed the Blair Witch Project, that movie follows no rules of film structure, but the people that made it were very aware of those rules. And in fact, the guy who directed the Blair Witch Project, Eduardo Sanchez, he just directed the season finale of season 1 of Yellow Jackets. And if you watch that, you can see that he very much is an expert filmmaker, and he can film in a traditional style just as well as anybody. So he can make a movie that's found footage, or he can make a traditional movie. He's really good at either one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donald, I want to thank you for joining me. And I know your phone's about to die on us, but everybody go check out Culture Shock releasing. You can still get Cannibal Hookers with Hooker with a Hacksaw and the record. I can't believe they still have it. I ordered it. I pre-ordered it, and it's great. So if you guys are into the B movie stuff, the Grindhouse stuff, definitely check it out. That's a good one. And come see Donald at Bride of FrankenCon in June, like he said earlier. We're gonna have a good time.
Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Well, thanks for inviting me on your show.
Hey, my pleasure, man. We'll get you back sometime, and we'll definitely chat about movies while we're at FrankenCon. So looking forward to it.
Okay, well, I'll definitely see you then.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and stay spooky, my dudes.
All right. Good night.
Good night.